How's everyone doing? For those of you who may not know, my name is Oren. I come from a different dimension, universe, and I'm here to warn you about the Void. An ever-hungering dimensional swallower. Currently, I'm on the cusp of knowing how to stop it for good before it's too late. Sorry for the long wait, my friends. I had to go on a mental break due to the last story. It just brought up scars I believe wouldn't affect me. Normally I have the mental fortitude to withstand anything, but remembering the past is painful, to say the least. But I digress. Last night I went through my memory banks to see what I could have missed, and I found a dimension I've been to that you could help with removing the void. However, this event is not for the faint of heart. After what happened with the last visit, I traveled to another place. I must have repressed this dimension entirely. I don't remember any of what happened to me until I found the file. It all starts off where the last story left off. A blinding flash of light. As I was moving through the white zone, which I've dubbed Tabula Rasa, I watched a story of a young girl in an orphanage who was being forced to watch as a child was ripped to shreds in front of her. The graphic detail was terrifying. It made me nauseous. The young girl was able to escape the demon, but barely. I couldn't shake the feeling. She just seemed familiar. It's always strange traveling through the zone. I feel like I've been here before, like I made this place, but that can't be. I was born on a planet with parents, friends. Like this was my home. The place I thought to be my home is just something I made up. I refuse this to be the case. It could just be the zone, because it's still largely unknown to me. The one last flash of light, I entered a new dimension, and this one, it was odd. It looked as if I landed in an old Victorian city with cobbled streets, people walking around in old outfits, which suit automatically matched so that I could blend in. The residents of this place were odd, as in every one of them wore normal Victorian attire, but they all had plague masks. The streets smelled of a mixture of perfume, sewage, rotting flesh. The combination of them all had my stomach churning and dry heaving. It didn't take long for the suit to filter the smells out. I was able to finally function. Looking around, there were many stores, as I must have dropped into a market, and surprisingly no one was looking at me, wondering why I appeared in a flash of light. Everyone there seemed oblivious. They just kept going on with their normal existence. Walking around the shopping center, there was an overabundance of butchers. There was one tailor, one cobbler, 2 bakeries, and 3 churches. I wanted to look further into the stores themselves. The butchers had meat, and they all sold the same kind, just named cattle. Nothing specific, just cattle. I thought that was odd, but I can still understand everything about my travels has been odd. Going into the cobbler, they had only leather shoes, and the tailor only sold leather clothing from jackets to underwear. It was all leather. Maybe whatever plague these people are dealing with, it was transmittable through the skin. The sun was setting on this town, and I needed a place to stay, so I wandered around a bit and found a tavern with rooms for rent. Issue is I had no currency to buy a room. Looking around, it was still as if nothing I did bothered anyone, as if I was completely outside the scope of vision or ability to notice me at all. So I just went to one of the rooms and I broke in. It was just for the night. In the morning, I was feeling rested, and I kept asking people to speak to their leader, whoever runs the town, but no one answered. After a couple of hours of being ignored, I was approached by 3 people wearing the same attire, but red and gold trimmed. Royal guards. "We are the royal guards, and you are an invader, and the king wants a word with you," they said. Sure, I wanted to speak with him anyhow. But how did you notice me, and yet no one else did? They didn't answer, but motioned for me to follow them. We were walking for about 15 minutes when I saw it. A white and gold tower with a large brick building attached to it. It was when I was within 20 yards of the large building that I got a warning from the suit that contagious hazards were trying to invade, but he was able to filter it all. These hazards were a fungus, ones I had never encountered before. While I was walking, the suit was running a diagnostic of the unknown fungus. I entered the building, and there was a long red carpet leading to a throne made of leather that looked like it was one that the tailors had made. On the throne was a king, a large, humanoid being that was bound to the chair and without his head. He was rotting away, yet I could feel a terrifying presence as I approached him. The guard stopped a few yards before I reached him. He didn't get closer, not sure why, but I didn't think much of it at the time. When I was at the base of his throne, I could see fungal growths where his head would be. His body was covered with these growths, and it was then that he spoke in a thunderous tone. I could feel his very voice shaking within my soul. "You are an invader in my lands. I have felt your presence since you arrived, and I'm intrigued on how you are immune to my control," the Headless King said. It was then that I realized the fungus, the people, and the plague were all a part of the king's presence. Looking back, the rotting flesh smell was the population, and everyone I met so far had been deceased. "I came here to warn you and your people that a great evil is coming. The stars in the sky are vanishing, and the void will swallow you as well. The void has been here, and has no power over my realm. She was banished long ago and refuses to come back. You are invading, so give me a good reason why I shouldn't end you now," replied the king. Within his words, I felt malice and ill will. With his threat, I started to see the walls around me closing in. The Headless King seemed to be getting farther away. The suit let me know this wasn't a hallucination, but his power was shaping reality around him passively. The king was stuck to his chair, however, its powers were so great that the very fabric of time and space were bending. I yelled in desperation, but my screams were silenced as I was buried in a mound of fungus. Somehow I must have breathed enough spores in before the suit could filter them out. And subsequently, I had been infected. Shortly after being entombed, I lost consciousness. It was days, maybe weeks later, when I awoke inside a factory behind old, rusty bars. They were normal-looking humans, all stripped naked, living in squalor, some sort of collar around their necks. As they felt my neck, and I had one as well. The place smelled of feces, body odor. Upon closer look, none of the humans here had the fungal infection tied to them. However, they all had a marking on their neck resembling the sign Omega. When I approached one of them to see what was going on, a wave of fear washed over me. Their eyes and tongues had been removed. No one here could talk or see. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't because my vocal cords, they were removed. The suit was repairing the damage that I was dealt, but the fungus was making it hard to keep it working at 100%. As I waited to see what was going on, I heard footsteps approach me. What came into the room was a large creature. It seemed to be a number of people melded together and patched using the same fungus. It had 7 arms, 4 heads, with each eye working and moving. It smelled of decay and fresh blood. It carried a few lashes and came into my cell. It grabbed me and 2 others and ordered us to move. It kept walking down this long hallway, these rusty metal walls. In the background, I could hear saws whirring and meat being chopped up. In an instant, I pieced it all together. This was the slaughterhouse. And we were the cattle. I wanted to fight back, but I felt if I tried, I'd be killed on the spot. So I bided my time for an opening. We finally got into a room where another one of these abominations opened the door and let us in. It then tied our hands together. In the room was a metal grate with holes for drainage, and above the grate was a single metal hook. The thing grabbed the first person and put them on the hook, impaling them right under their collarbone. They did little to fight as the thing moved closer and proceeded to flay the man alive, carefully removing all of his skin, aside from his head. Anytime the man would move, the thing would hit him on the head, knocking him out. The man stopped moving, as I assumed he was killed in this process. The abomination grabbed a cleaver and ripped into his stomach to remove his organs. I wished his death swift after that, as his body was limp. This thing then proceeded to eat the intestines, slurp them up as if they were noodles of spaghetti. I couldn't bear this anymore, and I cried, knowing that I may die. The abomination then started to make cuts into the husk of a man, and with that removing large portions of muscle, tissue, tossing them into the buckets nearby. And once all of his muscles were removed, he was beheaded and finally removed from the hook. The abomination took the body and tossed it into a chute. Next was the lady in front of me, who actually fought, kicking, punching. But to no avail, as she was swiftly hooked and knocked out. My suit let me know all repairs were done. Now, this gave me hope, so I took the opportunity to sprint towards the only exit I saw, the body chute. And as I ran by the abomination, I let out a powerful yell. The thing laughed. "You can't escape." It swung one of its arms, hitting me in the spine with a steel hammer. I felt my spine being crushed by it. It then tried to pick me up, but the suit activated a powerful shock, sending this thing to its knees, buying me time to jump through the chute. It felt like I slid down the chute for 30 minutes before I finally fell into a mound of rotting bones and flesh. I stood up from the pile and looked around for an exit. It was then I realized I was in a cave with thousands of dead bodies. Bodies and bones. In the distance I saw a light. I carefully walked across the dead and escaped through a small hole. Outside the hole was the town. It was about a mile away. My suit informed me that it had fixed my spine fully, found resistance to the fungus. With that information, I slowly made my way to the city again. Since the suit's fully integrated with my cells, I was able to get a new disguise without much effort. As I entered the city, I could see it wasn't working, as all the citizens just stared at me. As I approached the gold tower, the citizens became more and more restless. They were all pointing, making awful screeching sounds. I opened the door and the king was there. The headless king yelled out and shook the room. "I am older than time. I have seen the end and the beginning of all things. But I haven't seen you. What are you, traveler, to be immune to my power?" It was then that I was summoned by the abominations. They all attacked me at once, holding me in place and dragging me to the king. As I was forced to kneel in front of him, I could feel it trying to break into my mind. I could hear it speaking to me in languages that I'd never heard. What are you? I have seen all life and all possible things, and yet you have evaded my vision. As he spoke, the words started to twist and turn as natural laws started to break down. The very thing that held me was turned to dust, and the room around me was melting. The headless king on his throne was doing all of this, breaking the base reality with his thoughts. The suit felt the danger and worked a way to resist it. However, his psionic abilities, they were able to affect me still. In a flash, he showed me how the headless king was made. How he was a being of pure decay. The platonic concept of death and decay. As he fought off the void, he left a part of him in it. This thing was able to resist the void, ultimately winning the war. I felt like the headless king couldn't kill me. So he was showing me what I needed to know. And as fast as it came to, the vision left. And all that was left was me and the king. Beside me were twisted abominations fused into the walls and the floors. The headless king told me to leave, to never return. And as I left the tower, just outside the door, all of the cattle were being ripped open by the residents. Bones cracking, screams. The blood was everywhere, even the air. The sky was a dark red hue. The creatures, they all saw me. Their masks that they had wore started to open and reveal hidden mouths of razor-sharp teeth that were all stained black and red. They all rushed me, and I crouched into a ball to defend myself. It was then that I saw a blinding white flash. And I was teleported out of the dimension again. Into safety. But what horrors do I await in the next one? Any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. It was Arthur C. Clarke. Orin here. At least, I was Orin. I'm now something more. Something bigger than anything, but I digress. I was Orin. A scientist who had thought ideas and stories. Let's talk about what you perceive as God. The Absolute is a being so large it can only be listed as an absolute infinity. Something completely and entirely unreachable by all means, possibilities. This thing, or God, isn't what you humans have come up with. It isn't just omniscience or omnipotence, but something greater and beyond any definition and rationalization. Let me start with how this all happened. See, since my last story, I've been trying my best to find out how to take out the being who is swallowing the infinite narratives in this dimension. The void is a being made to be the concept of fear, anxiety, depression, hunger. A being so destructive that the narratives that it consumes can no longer exist in any thoughts, completely erased from all history, all events, as if they never existed in the first place. The end of all stories, entirely. This is an issue I set out to resolve, as I didn't want you to suffer the same fate as my people. So as the last story mentioned, a being known as the Headless King seemed to have been able to banish the void permanently. I studied long and hard. I went through all possibilities and impossible scenarios. I spent many sleepless nights in constant fear and anxiety, just trying to figure out how it's possible to remove such a commanding presence. After all, how can you destroy something that sees me and you as a story? Transcendence. I had to transcend beyond the narrative, beyond its narrative. So I began to work on an upgrade to the suit. It can already transcend through the dimensions, but what about the higher narratives that existed outside and external to the current measurable and immeasurable cosmology? Now, after my tweaks, I found that I could finally travel upward through the narratives, viewing each one as I passed as words on a page. It wasn't until I got to a white space that I stopped. Now, this zone seemed to be where all the stories were being made. Imagine how terrifying it is to be in an endless room at every angle. This area was bright white and floated in the space. I just kept seeing words appear and disappear from my sight. It was akin to the words bleeding out of the white background, being absorbed back in. Even my thoughts were written on the page. I dubbed this place the Bleeding Edge, as it was beyond the edge of conceptualization and narrative, and it bled this narrative into the multiverse. At the time, I was still on edge as anyone else would be if they had seen their thoughts appear in a physical form in front of them. The mere idea that I was nothing but another word in this place, it sunk me further and further into my depression and my terrified state. As I panicked, I saw all my memories being pieced together in front of me. I had to relive the very first test of the suit, where a woman was compressed into a ball of meat and hair and bone. Or how I could see the man I tried to save from killing himself, only for me to look into my eyes and tear out his muscles one by one, with each snap and tear got audibly louder. I started to sweat and panic more and more. Even though I felt like I was on top, I could still hear the void. I could feel its presence. I could feel my mind rushing as the possibilities of this should be none. I escaped the void's narrative. I know I did. How is it continuing? And it was there that I saw it. The void manifested in me, turning the whole white background into a black one. Words, stories, and existence stopped being written, and it was just me and it. The void walked towards me slowly with a grin on its face. If you forgot, the void takes up the form of a large humanoid with pale white skin. No eyes, no ears, no nose. The void never spoke with his lips, but his mind. This thing enters your mind and hijacks your thoughts, emotions, actions. I felt you, Oren, moving through the narrative ladders and thinking I will not be able to catch up or meet you. The silly child you are, this is nothing to me. The readers, the author, they're just an appetizer. Now you are the main course. The void bent reality and the bleeding edge, causing it to quickly close the space in on me. I felt as if the sea of black ink was swallowing me whole, and within seconds I was drowning in the black liquid, and I could feel my skin peeling off slowly as I was being flayed alive. Layer by layer, my skin, muscle, and bone were consumed in the sea of hunger, until I was but a consciousness, floating through the ever-expansive void. Depression has sunk in. I felt like I could never escape. The void had won. When I was at my lowest, I remembered my wife and child, Tikva and Kirin. The warmth of their memory gave me hope. Something I felt was impossible when confronting the void. The hope gave me strength. It gave me An epiphany. Why can I remember everything, but other people cannot? Why can I still think even though my physical form doesn't exist? It was then that another voice spoke to me, and it sounded like my own. Oren, you're fine. We are absolute. Know your existence and break out of this story. It was then a blinding white light surrounding me, and I was teleported into a different zone. This one was odd, just an infinite library full of books. And I stood in front of the librarian. The librarian was a being of pure principle. It had no physical form, but it was there, and I could feel its presence in my head. You need to know, this is your only book, Oren, as you are its own author. I looked confused, and I lifted the book titled The Absolute. I spoke up and asked, "What is this place? And who are you?" The being laughed and decided to create a physical form. You'll learn who you are in the book I gave you, however. I will help guide you until you know your true potential. You are in the Narratio Grandis, a library of all narratives. Everything here is everything that ever will, or was. The hub of possible and impossible. All stories exist here, in these books. I was confused, so I just acted as if I knew what they were talking about. After a short time, the librarian explained how this area cannot be damaged by anyone but two beings. One was the Headless King, and the other, the Absolute. After it was done speaking, the librarian disappeared. I sat down and I began reading the book. The book explained all of my travels, how I used to be something greater, and wanted to experience emotions. So I lowered my existence into an avatar named Oren. It was me the whole time. I was the one above the narrative. I was the answer to the void the whole time. The knowledge of all things flowed into me for the first time since my original split. I knew how to stop the void, however, this is a warning. The void must exist. The void consumes narratives and is the deaths of stories. I can't stop it still, only because it was my own design. The void is a universal necessity. I know what you're thinking. Does that mean that we all die? Yes. Embrace the ending of your narrative, as it is how I wrote it. You must be afraid. You must be confused. But in the end, these feelings don't matter. So what am I? Well, I am your author, your origin, and your synopsis. Everyone is in an aspect of its writer, and with my creation, you allowed your creation of narrative itself. I am one with all. I am absolute. I can see your story right now, and you have many more things looking up for you. I know, since I wrote it. But this is my final goodbye for this narrative. But I have many more to come. Many trials and tribulations ahead of being a writer. However, to write this narrative, I became a human. This is my last story as one. Life is fleeting. But stories are forever. Signed, The Absolute. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast if you happen to be listening to this as a podcast, or as a YouTube, or however else you managed to have found this story for tonight. And as always, I would love to give a big thank you to everyone who's supporting me over on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs, you guys keep things going, especially while things have been nuts for me over the past couple of months. And things have been getting crazier and crazier as time goes on. You guys are the ones who are keeping me sane. And I mean that with all sincerity, that you guys have helped me immensely. So, in my personal life and my professional life, I want to give a very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Burnett, Kraus, LaQueda, Canizales, MrCreepyPasta, PebisPleaser, Canis, Joseph Calarrudo, BuddhaBee, Dante, Kinkade, Foxhound 803, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion, Beefcake, Cultist, Love You M, INSANITYGamerX, Cornejo, Yarghoul, Clark, Kearns, himbojerry, SamaHigh, CrusaderChocobo, Atomaurus, Captain Scurvy, Espadine, Braden Morris, Nate Cull, Our Min Sect Time, Angelus, Seclude, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier and Cheyenne, 6 Gay Rats in a Trench Coat, Turtle Man, Cryolinium, Lord Life's Best, Goring Trimagazine, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Shelly J, Ficamel, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Polly Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Mog, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kaya, The Ginger Bros, and Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, and Corey Kenshin. To everyone on this list, everyone in the description, and of course anyone who could support even just $1, thank you all so much for making my life significantly easier with this. And if you guys would like to be able to join any of the names that you see here or down there or anything at all, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And with that, I wish you all a very, very pleasant night and sweet dreams.